Audio render error? Come on, don't bullshit me. Alright, here we go. We are going live in 3, 2, 1. Cue the intro music. Hello everyone, this is Marlyonama with another episode of Marly0Live. And I hope everyone's doing good today. And that we have quite an event going on right now. A lot of discussion of E3 and a few things that have been on my mind, including fallen YouTubers and laughing stocks of the internet. And laughing stocks, I mean, that would basically go into another story, including a few that have essentially hits close to home, essentially. Now, again, there was one viewer, but that viewer probably got caught in wind, whatever. Now, I'm technical issues aside, I am also both streaming and recording at the same time in case the stream gets hacked and the video doesn't archive like it did last month. Now, first off, in gaming news, there is more game mechanics shown in Death Stranding, coming out in November this year, if all things go to plan. And we're also able to craft items out of thin air, by the looks of the trailer. According to IGN, there is also hold on, let me upload this. Why would you waste all your money on a computer that specializes in one thing, or a computer that specializes in multiple things? Like, I have a Toshiba laptop, and it's like that I got back in 2011. It's a pretty powerful big, do all sorts of things, really. And let's go look at here. And look, Sony pulled Pro Evolution Soccer from PlayStation Plus, but not Konami. That is the Disney live action remake, the of animated movies. They are not really looking into quality, but simply nostalgia of the retarded masses. And the trailer for the new Lion King looks as scary as hell. I mean, they look even more. I mean, the CG lions even look more cartoony than the actual cartoon. Even though the CGI is supposed to be realistic, I pretty much action movie, I like to fit it under the category of cartoony realism, which is CGI that is supposed to look but is actually a cartoon. Look at Detective Pikachu and the Alvin the Chipmunks movie, where they act CGI creatures that look cartoony but with realistic textures, including eye and fur textures. I really hate cartoony realism. It's scary as all hell, and in fact, many animated movies are printing this to blur the line between what's a cartoon and what's supposed to be realistic, and what's supposed to be animated. I mean, if something's supposed to be animated, just cartoon, because otherwise you get abominations like Sonic the Manhog. Like Sonic the Manhog and that news regarding a live-action Little Mermaid, despite the fact that most of the movie takes place underwater and makes putting any dialogue in there completely useless, because in a cartoon it would make more sense, while live action translate well to live action. I mean, some movies are best, some movies are just best left alone, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Which is why call all people to boycott these live action remakes. Disney must stop. Here's an excerpt from Captain Midnight. His opinion. Kudos to Captain Midnight for being in the same boat as me.
This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. A few months ago, released the sequel to the undeniable classic Mary Poppins, and it was kinda whatever.
Well, it was already live action.
What I did really enjoy was when the cast found inside a porcelain bowl, which was animated in a classic Disney style. And it turns out that according to director Rob Marshall, those scenes alone actually added a year to the post-production process of the film because it was such a big undertaking. The fact is, Disney doesn't do a lot of animation like that anymore. Old pros had to be called out of retirement just so someone around would actually know what they were doing.
I know how to do 2D animation, but unfortunately, people are looking into too much CGI and realism and all that crap. Problem is, people are calling into too much 3D CGI all because people believe are all because these 2D and all because these studios shut down because of the because people were comparing them to what you see on TV. And if you haven't seen that video from Dark Taxi or whatever of how the Rugrats and Nickelodeon ruined 2D animation in the US, I mean, it's not just because of computers. You can still do 2D animation on the computers that look hand-drawn. And I will basically go into that discussion during my Titan AE review, which is coming out this month, and why this essentially was the nail in the coffin for 2D animation and what set a downward spiral for it to not be released in theaters. Get into Titan AE a lot. I'll cover this train wreck in a second. Right now, I'm just finishing up the script and continuing with the video.
That kind of lush, well-realized animation style that Disney once led the world in has kind of fallen by the wayside, replaced by CG animation or by the more simple, fast, and cheap style found on TV. Now, both these styles have created great stuff too, so I don't want to throw them under the bus. Old Book, Beauty and the Beast, these are all films betting on that audiences want almost literally exactly what they've seen before, but with CG instead of hand animation. Endless.
Fuck you, Nickelodeon, you killed an art style!
So I never really thought about making a video about it myself, but wow, this Aladdin trailer was just a point. I mean, just look at this. Like, really look at it. It's so self-evidently bad. Like, that creepy deepfake of Steve Buscemi of Jennifer Lawrence looks better than this. And yet, we all know they're gonna keep making these. There's no
unless we boycott it and get a brain.
Capcom has brought a block to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Disney's Aladdin. That's right.
I get the seductive appeals. Who doesn't like Emma Watson, Will Smith, or Donald Glover? Stick them in a familiar story that we all know and love, and you have a pretty good recipe to make money. Only the slight exception of Jungle Book, it's almost never been very interesting. Managed to really have a distinctive taste of its own. It's like drinking a reminder of, hey, actual juice or soda, those are pretty good. These films take the painstaking work of some of the best animators ever and turns it into this. you love, but they're not sung by incredible Broadway vocalists, but by likable actors who can kind of sing okay. I think there's a standard list to say to defend these movies, like that they bring the story to a new generation. The problem with that is that the original movies, with all their artistry, still exist. In fact, if anything, they're easier to access now than ever. But the other thing I've heard people say that really gets under my skin is the idea that the are more realistic and therefore are some kind of upgrade. That's an obvious indication that animation as a medium doesn't really get what it deserves. Aladdin is a story about a likable thief who meets a magic genie and falls in love with a princess. Nothing about that needs to be realistic. The fact that animation allows the story to feel like pure fantasy is one of the most appealing things about it. But even if
it doesn't need to look
it's
realistic.
more
And
realistic
CGI doesn't need to
than
look
this.
realistic.
It
It
just
can still look
way
cartoony.
worse and a lot creepier.
Direct from the streets of Agrabah, Aladdin, Abu, Jasmine, Jafar, the magic carpet, and of course, the big blue guy and...
But you might be asking, what about The Jungle Book? That movie was pretty good. And I would agree that it's easily the best of the bunch, but it still suffers from many of the same symptoms. It might be a fun novelty to watch Christopher Walken voice King Louie, but by the time he's kind of singing through a pretty half-assed version of I Want to Be Like You, the limitations of that approach become uncanny valley-ish, near photorealistic version of The Lion King. Not when the original is still there and still so great. And I definitely don't get how anyone could prefer the semi-realistic, dull CG to the colors and vibrant. Like, I know the Lion King remake will probably crack $1 billion worldwide. I'm pretty comfortable making that prediction based on just how well Beauty and the Beast, but I still can't really shake the feeling that I don't.
Okay, enough of this. I mean, the more I watch this, the more angry I get. And, yeah. Now, time to go on to fallen YouTubers. Darkside Phil announced he got married. And then again, judging by the pictures, it looks a lot like a plastic doll. Or a mail order bride. I don't know, was this Catherine lady, really in it for the money or just wanted to pamper the man baby? I mean, if you all don't know Darkside Phil, he is this, YouTube Let's Play, stuff like that, and the Kiwi Farms, and also follow his story on the Kiwi Farms, which has, the nature I kinda detest because it's sort of, serves as a, sorry, hiccups. It sort of serves as a, internet stalking and bullying forum on questionable individuals on the internet. And now these forums began as, website to pretty much discuss this Christian Weston Chandler dude and Sonichu, which is why the Kiwi Farms actually has Sonichu in the page layout. And the Kiwi Farms has also been following up with Spoony, since the Spoony hasn't really done anything on YouTube, even though people still give him crap. I no longer respect Spoony, essentially. He created hilarious, and the driver is also fine. The reason being is, he was driving a piece of shit car from 20 years ago, and he, couldn't avoid the skid in the cold Illinois winter. Now that is old news. I don't know what Noah Antwill do, and stuff like that. And I've invited a lot of people to the live chat, and so far no fish has bitten. Maybe the stream is kind of buggy right now. Okay. Oh, I've been liked. Who was going to you're essentially going to be able to watch the whole episode right here if you've missed it. And now I'm going to talk about something that has been going under my skin for a while. You may or may not have heard of this, but there are these people called Susan Schofield and Corey Cabana. Schofield family have these two special needs kids that they believed to be schizophrenic for a long time and wrote a book about it. They've mentioned of both Oprah and Dr. Phil, which are just tabloid talk show hosts. Dr. Phil isn't even a real doctor and a PhD, but he's not licensed to practice anything because he's simply used his degree to get into the tabloid industry, which is really meant for stupid people to essentially pander to their ignorance and stuff like that. But by the looks of it, their kids, Janny and Bodhi, don't even appear schizophrenic. They're actually, I believe they're both on the autism spectrum because Janny, of course, would stim constantly by rubbing her hands together and stuff like that. That, of course, is a symptom of autism. Now, while they were banking on Dr. Phil and stuff like that back 10 years ago, they were actually in the radio broadcasting business, and part of that they started their own Bipolar Nation radio through LA Talk Radio, which of course dove into the corruption of the mental health care system and the special education system, which I do which I am affected by because I also grew up with learning challenges and some mental health issues, and they also shed light on these residential treatment centers, which replaced psychiatric hospitals that simply use aversive punishments, and they've been called the troubled teen industry because I was actually placed in one right in between my sophomore and junior year of high school, and it has traumatized me. And I'm lucky. I was lucky that I got out within months because kids typically stay there long term for like over a year, possibly even more, especially if they're wards. Now, these people have shed light on it until specifically on Diamond Ranch Academy, which Susan and Michael Schofield broadcasted. Here's a blog into it called Julie's Take from September 2014, and it says Diamond Ranch Academy files a defamation suit against the Schofields. Now, this, of course, they were not making up these these things about Diamond Ranch Academy. These were actually given out people who had personally been there and noticed this. Now, this is an industry that is essentially profited on, essentially based on the war on drugs and the failing education lawsuit. Now, for those of you who don't know, SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation, and it's started by shady individuals and corporate thugs to silence critics, similar to what Jim Sterling went through with digital homicide and stuff like that. But of course, they live in Utah, and of course, small southern Utah. These people, of course, are very wealthy and politically connected, and so they're able to afford these essential, even though there are a bunch of anti-SLAP laws. Basically pulled the Schofields contract, and of course, that is essentially what ended their marriage. Of course, because they were completely living off of Phil's contributions, even though Dr. Phil, I hate that man because he supports these same residential facilities. He his partners with Aspen Education Group, which has shut down a lot of facilities and also been subject to lawsuits where severely injured and whatnot. Which begs the question, which begs to my issue with the Schofields is that to go on Dr. Phil's show, even though Dr. Phil was supporting these same facilities that they were protesting against on the radio. But after I've dug into the kiwi farms and learned about what they were actually doing with the funds from the Jain and stuff like that, I no longer have respect for Susan Schofield because she promised. I was scheduled to be her talk show sharing my story and shedding light on this issue just before they were taken down. And Schofield Productions was really relaunched to simply beg for money instead of bringing back Bipolar Nation Radio the way it did, as independently. And because of that, she was essentially withholding and embezzling money from the Jain Foundation into really just not really doing anything with it, but really just a tax shelter and really just to throw half-assed essentially. Now, if you go to the Jain Foundation's website, it's down essentially. The website's down because apparently they've the government, the IRS, went into them and essentially found what they were doing. They were essentially taking advantage of. She was essentially using the compassion of survivors in the troubled teen industry and those who have suffered abuse to fund her own agenda, which is why she didn't even try to part ways with Dr. Phil when he was promoting this stuff. Are in state custody, both Bodhi and Janny, and they are improving since being off these medications, which proves down not schizophrenic. Because schizophrenics feel worse when they're off of their medication, not better. Trust me, I've known a couple schizophrenics. They pretty much need medication in order to function, essentially, because otherwise their delusions and will typically go control their lives. Now, they have also gotten into issues with the other things like the Rotenberg Center. I no longer respect Susan Schofield because she was preying on me to fund her agenda, which was really not to end the troubled teen industry and end this whole thing. It was really just to throw pity parties with her children that she was essentially excluding and giving them low expectations. Those are just half-assed pity parties, which are really just meetups with other special needs kids rather than inclusive activities in the community. That essentially gives them a lost cause. You have not essentially gone out and helped people. Good facilities, good schools that are designed to essentially serve these kids have now been shut down, and more of these resident under Medicaid programs continue to pop up and whatnot. If anything, if you support this cause, do not tune in to Dr. Phil, of course, because banking in on this, and also as well as Susan, which is why Michael essentially divorced her after their radio show was canned. by this lawsuit. And of course, since this was a big source of income, they of course wanted to divorce her to save these kids from residential placement. Again, I'm about to run out of time here. I'm past the 32-minute mark. Well past the 32-minute mark. Because the Schofields are not really who they said all these years ago. Because what I've read about Corey, Susan's new husband Corey, and what his previous marriage was like, it's not pretty at all. Like, he wanted to create problems just to essentially make money off of it. Now, they keep saying, well, he had Munchausen by proxy too. Again, well, Munchausen by proxy is really only like that comes up in court, and there's only really been a handful of cases ever. Like, I kind of doubt that the condition really exists. Again, I don't want to really get too much into it because I am not a doctor by any means. And I'm also not a lawyer. Like, which is why I try to avoid these residential treatment centers. Like, if you have a kid who has a learning disability or a mental illness, I suggest you basically try community-based treatments, whether that be an inpatient hospital in your community or day treatment or homeschooling, before sending them to a real school, and avoid these. The people are thriving on this. The Schofields didn't really care about survivors of institutional abuse getting ready for to review Titan AE and eventually my Square Timber episode and my commentary over the Digimon review I did, because the series is of course turning 20 years old, and it's I want to comment on what I was thinking back then when I reviewed it all these back in 2011 and 2012. So this is Marlyonama signing off, and see you